We have a long and deep relationship to the St. Croix River and its watershed. We have been here since the glaciers melted away, since the rivers flowed in the other direction. Today we call ourselves Passamaquoddy, a name given to us long ago by our neighbors the Maliseets. Passamaquoddy means the people who spear pollock, a fish that is still important to us. But our traditional name for ourselves was Skijin, meaning people of the earth. The Passamaquoddy people are divided into two communities, Indian Township, inland along the river, and Zibayig, which means along the edge, located on a spit of land in Passamaquoddy Bay. Each year we journey for 2 days by canoe, down the river from Indian Township and out into the bay to Zibayig. We do this to remind ourselves of the unity of our people and to keep our community ties strong. We call this the journey of the ancestors. We are one of the 4 remaining tribes of this region, with the Penobscot, Mi'kmaq, and Maliseet people. Together we call ourselves Wabanokewiyig, people of the dawn. We have been here for more than 10,000 years. And in that time we have shared this land and the river with the fish and the animals and the plants. We have lived from the bounty that the land and waters offered us. We traditionally call this watershed Skudig, meaning burnt land along the river. The story is that we would burn some of the land to manage the blueberries that were, and still are, such an important food for us. We have told many stories about Skudig and how the river and the land were created. How the tides in Passamaquoddy Bay came to be. We also told a story of the time the ice retreated north, when summer pushed it away. We have been here that long.
The beautiful Neben, whose name means summer, saw to the north the land Lotaguasnug, where Bunil, whose name means winter, lived. Her grandmother, Gamiwan, whose name means the rain, warned her not to go. Your beauty will fade, she said. Your green dress fade, your hair turn gray, your strength becomes weakness. But Neben did not listen. She traveled Lotaguasnug. As she approached Lotaguasnug, she grew cold. Her green dress turned yellow and her hair turned gray. She became a prisoner of Bunil. Her grandmother called together the invisible spirits, Saunasan, the south wind, Jibanug, the east wind, and Sinudzakanug, the southwest wind. Fight like heroes, she said to them when she sent them off, and rescue Neben from Bunil. And in the battle, Bunil grew weak and fell, and he freed Neben from his grasp and retreated to the north. The rivers melted, lakes shone in the sunlight, flowers unfolded in the warm breezes. The land was free of the ice.
We also told stories of how the moose came to be so large, and the squirrel so small, and who changed the frog's nose. We told stories of how we came to be, how Gluskab, the man of mystery, shot an arrow into the ash tree and created us. We told stories of how he taught us to hunt, to build weirs for fish, to build our wigwams and canoes, how he showed us the virtues of plants for medicines and food. We told stories of how he hunted for whale in his stone canoe. One of our stories, though, was about when we foretold the future.
2,000 years ago, Meddybemps, a visionary, saw that a white cloud of death and change would come from Jibenug, the east. He told everyone that it was time to leave. 3/4 of our ancestors moved Skiaz-Nuk west, spreading out across the land. Some of these people came to be known as the Ojibwa. We, Wabanukewig, the Wabanaki, stayed behind as the guardians of the eastern door. Over the centuries, our Ojibwa cousins would send emissaries back to make sure that we were following the ways of our ancestors and to keep the connections between us and them strong. After all this time, the Passamaquoddy and Ojibwa languages are still close, and we share the same stories as we did in the past. Today, the Ojibwa are waiting for us to sing our song to them, so they can bring our teachings back to us.
Some stories we told in stone. We told them along the river and along the edges of the sea. These stones, in their way, told of who we were, how we hunted, what we believed. In the early times, the water was pure, the air filled only with the birds and the scent of pine and sweetgrass and the sea. Our territories extended east across the river into present-day New Brunswick, Canada, and west to Mount Desert Island. They extended from the islands of the Gulf of Maine and the Bay of Fundy, north along the river and its tributaries into the deep forests of this land. We moved along these waterways, hunting the animals and collecting the foods and medicines that each season offered. Those who knew the medicines were highly regarded. Only certain persons had the ability to diagnose and treat illnesses with plants. At Meddybemps Lake, at the outlet of the Dennis River, we had a settlement that our ancestors established almost 9,000 years ago. We used this place as a seasonal home until as recently as the 1600s, about the time the first Europeans began to settle here. We called the river Gedanusk, which means place to gather animal scent. And the name Meddybemps itself means plenty of alewives. And even after this spot on Meddybemps stopped being a permanent settlement, the Passamaquoddy still came back here in the early spring for the alewife run. During the run, the river was said to be so crowded with alewives that the waters ran black. We could cross the river on the fish's backs without getting our feet wet. At first, only a few seasonal families used this place at any one time. And there were times early on when the lake levels were so low that we didn't stop here at all. But after the waters rose again, we used it continuously, and the settlement grew for many thousands of years. We now call this settlement Ntolonapemk, our relative's place. It is a peaceful spot at the edge of the lake and at the heart of an important network of canoe routes. Because of the contours of the land, good travel routes lead in almost every direction, with short portages from one stream to another. From here, our relatives could canoe almost anywhere, downriver to the sea, east to the Scudic River, and west and north into the large watershed that was their home. After all this time, this place is still here, but it has changed. Today, it is an EPA Superfund cleanup site, and yet we still hold a deep connection to it. It is a window to our past. Early in its cleanup, the Environmental Protection Agency uncovered artifacts in the soil. These traces from our past prompted EPA to bring in consultants to evaluate the site for what else might lie here. From that evaluation, EPA decided to fund an extensive archaeological excavation at Ntolonapemk. So, in the year 2000, the Passamaquoddy tribe and archaeologists from the University of Maine at Farmington began a cooperative excavation of the site. Those things we found there speak to us about the lives of our relatives thousands of years ago. We found fire pits where food had been cooked, and refuse pits where food remains had been buried. We found house pits marking the floors of houses that had been dug partly into the ground. These oval houses had floors of beach gravel, and some were larger than 7 by 10 feet. We also found holes in which posts had been set to hold the skins or bark that covered the houses. In these pits, there were also countless bone fragments and charred plant remains. Radiocarbon dating showed some pieces of charred maple to be more than 9,000 years old. Thousands of fragments of fire-cracked rock told us that our relatives had boiled and roasted food here, and that they had maintained sweat lodges. Other stones that we found told us about what kind of tools our relatives had, which in turn gave us more details about their lives. We found projectile points for hunting, stone weights from atlatls for throwing spears, weights for fishing nets, axes for working wood, knives, scrapers, and choppers for preparing meat and hides. One knife, this ulu, is about 6,400 years old. Another one found in pieces may be more than 8,000 years old. We found hammer stones, stone rods and gouges, tools to make other tools. And the stone itself, the raw material from which these tools were made, has told us quite a bit, too. Many of the tools were made with local materials, white quartz and river cobbles, found literally a stone's throw from the village. But the most commonly used stone was rhyolite from Flint Island, a stone that our relatives used continuously for 4,000 years. Connecting water routes would have made it easy to reach. The sources of stone fan out from there. Stones from Idaho, Vinalhaven, and Narragansett Bay. Rhyolite from Mount Kineo on Moosehead Lake, and from the Tobic region of New Brunswick, Canada. We have found chert flakes from the Minas Basin of Nova Scotia. From this we know that our relatives maintained a wide travel network throughout the region, and then brought material back to Meddybemps to be worked. And the flakes, the remains of that tool-making, tell us that they made some of these tools at this spot. Interestingly, there are few large stone fragments in the tool-making debris. This means that the rough reduction of the raw stone, the first step in shaping it into a tool, was probably done somewhere else. It makes sense, someone quarrying stone would want to keep down the weight of what he was carrying, so he would knock off the big corners first. If he was trading stone, he would be supplying blanks for local artisans to work into finished tools. At Ndoma-Bem, this seems particularly the case with stone from farther away. Big reduction pieces are mostly local stone that could be easily carried to Ntolonapemk before any shaping. Though most of the stone worked at Ntolonapemk was available within a few days' travel, other stone was more exotic. We have found scraper fragments made of quartzite from as far away as northern Labrador and chert from northern New York. This means that our relatives took part in an even more extensive network of trade. This quartzite fragment of a scraper is especially interesting. The stone came from the Albanel region of Quebec, Canada. This is the home of the Ojibwa, our relatives who went west, and with whom we have kept in close contact for 2,000 years. And here was the stone that confirmed the story. But more than stones speak to us at Ntolonapemk. We have found ceramics, fragments of pots and jars as old as 2,800 years. We have also found unformed fragments of fired clay, direct evidence that our relatives manufactured pottery at Ndoma-Bem. Our relatives' use of ceramic pots at Ntolonapemk continued right up to the time of the arrival of the Europeans. This is about the time that Wampanoag in general abandoned the making of ceramics